Welcome, welcome to the Hard Skills Show and Podcast with me, Dr. Mira Brancu. I work with leaders in healthcare, research, STEM, and other technical fields who want to develop an authentic leadership identity and create a healthy, inclusive workplace environment to retain the best people doing the best work. In other words, developing the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. Now, this season, we're focusing on developing identity, which is the second stage of my strategic leadership pathway model. And today we have a really special guest, Dorie Clark, and we're going to talk about self-reinvention and thinking strategically about your career. Now, we value evidence-based practical solutions. And so I take notes. I want you to take notes too, reflect deeply, and identify at least one small step to further develop your hard skills muscle based on this conversation. Let me introduce Dorie Clark. She helps individuals and companies get their best ideas heard in crowded, noisy world. She's been named one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50. She was honored as a #1 communication coach in the world by Marshall Goldsmith, leading Global Coaches Awards, and one of the top 5 communication professionals in the world by Global Gurus. She's a keynote speaker and teaches executive education for Columbia Business School, among other things. She's the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Long Game, Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Stand Out, which was named the #1 leadership book of the year by Inc. magazine. Dorie has also been described by New York Times as an expert at self-reinvention, which is true. We're going to get into that, and helping others make changes in their lives. She's a frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review, and you can download her free Long Game Strategic Thinking Self-Assessment, which we'll talk about, at DorieClark.com/The Long Game. She has also a TED Talk, The Real Reason You Feel So Busy, that I bet every single person listening to this is going to be interested in. So, Dorie, I learned about you in a number of different ways. One of them being that you're part of Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Agency community. And I joined as a founding member of the Forefront program, which is like his next step legacy, powered by 100 coaches. I'm also in Dorie's Recognized Expert Community, a fantastic resource if you haven't checked it out, to grow as a recognized expert in one's field. And Dorie, you and I both have appointments at Duke University, you in the business school, me in the School of Medicine. So we seem to kind of travel in parallel, I guess. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, Mira. Glad to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did have a chance to binge read a number of your books in the past few days. And when I say binge read, it was like so pleasant and so easy to read your books. Like you write in such a way that it is like so easily digestible and so readable for so many people, so applicable for so many people. So before we get into that though, help us understand, like, how did you get to this? You help busy people take control of their lives through things like long game thinking and career reinvention, but you started out in journalism and campaign management with a college major in philosophy and a graduate degree in theology. And so you're kind of the epitome of reinvention yourself. How did you get to this point in your career transformation?
Yeah, thank you, Mira. So one of the things that I talk about in actually my first book, Reinventing You, is the difference between what I call capital R reinvention and lowercase r reinvention. And lowercase r reinvention is the kind of, sort of pleasant, like, oh, let's keep our skills fresh. We sometimes forget to do that, but it's a very helpful thing. But when we think about reinventing ourselves, what we typically think about is the capital R, the big change, the, changing careers or some kind of trauma or whatever. And the truth is, the way that I got to what I am doing now is definitely a product of capital R reinvention. It was things not working out the way that I had anticipated. And so it's true that in many cases, it can lead you to better places or places that you can't predict. But originally, I wanted to be an academic, and so I got a master's degree. But then I got turned down by all the doctoral programs that I applied to, so I had to kind of scratch that off the list. Although I did later come back to academia in a different form, so that's another possibility. And then I thought, oh, I'll be a journalist, and I was, but then I got laid off pretty early on as well. So I think that one of the key elements of reinvention in our modern society is just recognizing we have hypotheses, and the truth is sometimes they work out, a lot of times they don't, and we just have to be nimble enough to kind of keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. This is bringing up so many memories about my own career path. Many have seen my own reinvention several times. I went from a school counselor to a clinical psychologist for like a day before I went into management and leadership, and then an organizational psychologist who, at the time, everyone only knew me as a researcher in PTSD. And I really wasn't going to keep doing that at that point. I wanted to be known as someone who worked with women leadership, in women leadership. So reinventing myself took quite a bit of work and rethinking. And as I was reading your own books, I was seeing myself in that path. And so what are the challenges that you see some people experience when they think about this sort of daunting idea of having a new career, or being able to help other people see them in a different way?
Yeah, it can feel very daunting for people. I think ironically, it's not so much, people sometimes talk about, oh, well, it's easy if you're in your 20s, but I'm older, it's hard for me, or it's impossible for me. And I really want to say it's not that it is impossible for people once they hit a certain threshold, whether that's 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever it is. But I think that the part that is troubling for people and makes them perhaps feel emotionally that it's impossible is that there is a temporary loss of status. And that is really hard to deal with because, the truth is, if you're 24 and you lose your job and you have to switch to something else, okay, you were probably the lowest ranked employee at your old firm. Now you're the lowest ranked employee at your new firm. It's not that big of a deal. But if you have built up, 20 or 25 years of seniority somewhere, it can feel really emotionally damaging and precarious to have to quote unquote step back. Because the truth is, in almost all cases, you're not going to be able to immediately parachute into a position of equal stature in terms of reputation or in terms of money or whatever in a totally different industry right away. But it's also equally true that you, as a more senior professional, have learned transferable skills, you've made connections, you've built a network that actually does allow you to rebound fairly quickly. But there's usually that moment where you have to sort of feel like you're taking a step back. And that's the part that I think is so challenging for most people, is kind of dealing with that interstitial period of feeling like a schlub.
Yeah. I wonder what you think about this. So as you're talking, I think about, like, this is an identity crisis in some ways, right? And okay, yes, this season we're talking about leadership identity development. But it is, when I think about my own career and a couple of pivotal moments where I made a decision to reinvent myself. One of those was I was on a leadership track. I was really like being supported in continuing to go. And one of the next step up opportunities didn't work out. And I thought to myself, like, what is my next step? And I decided ultimately to go back to an individual contributor role, which some people would see as like, why would she do that? That's a step back. But my professional identity has never been my identity. It's been just something I did in my profession. But I know that like this connection to identity is a big piece. I'm sort of just curious to hear what your perspective is on working through like how we see ourselves as part of this process.
Yeah, you raise an incredibly important point, Mira, which is that for so many people, especially in American society, where the default question is always, what do you do? We do kind of conflate our professional identity with our identity. And there's kind of just total overlap with those things for many people, which is why, of course, as you know, the statistics are so damning and alarming when it comes to the health outcomes of retirees. That oftentimes basically within 5 minutes of someone retiring, if their life has been their job and they suddenly don't have their job anymore, they get sick, they get depressed, and things go downhill really rapidly. So obviously that's an outcome that we want to try to avoid. So it is useful and important to try to think, how can we broaden this? Because it's inevitable, over the course of a lifetime or a professional career, you're going to have some kind of a setback. I mean, maybe you get fired, maybe there's layoffs at your company, maybe you don't get the promotion you were counting on, whatever it is, it would be the vast exception if literally every phase of your career was totally smooth sailing. And so as a result, we need to be thoughtful about cultivating other pieces of ourselves in our lives. In my latest book, The Long Game, I talk about Google's 20% time concept, where they encourage their employees to sort of expand in new areas. And that's something that I think that all of us, whether our employers officially encourage that or not, I think we need to kind of do that for ourselves, asking ourselves in the context of our overall life, what's the 20% or 10 or 5 or whatever it is that we are cultivating that is for our development, for our interest, so that we're not just monodimensional.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece that I'm picking up on here is not just what we do as part of our identity, but what we're told we can't do. And your book outlines a lot of just really open, refreshing experiences with rejection. And I've had plenty of my own where I was like the only one who didn't get X, Y, and Z. Like I didn't, everyone in my graduating class got a postdoc offer. I did not. But that led to amazing other opportunities I would have never imagined had my eyes been closed to it, had I been upset about it, had I connected the rejection to my full identity instead of like this situation in time not being right.
Yeah, right? It's so good.
Yeah. Okay, so when we return, we'll be talking a lot more about the 20%, the identity piece, and how you can start this long game process of reinventing yourself. So we're nearing an ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dorie Clark. We now air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Find us on LinkedIn or YouTube at TalkRadio.nyc, and we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on TalkRadio.nyc at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fridays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on TalkRadio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and intangify your business today.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and with our guest today, Dorie Clark, where we're talking about reinvention. We talked about some of the challenges that can get in the way of reinventing ourselves, and some of them being related to how we see ourselves in terms of our identity, how we define that. Now, I'm kind of wondering, what have you found to be most important for people to think about and do in order to address these kind of challenges?
Yeah. So when it comes to challenges around identity, something that bears mentioning, Mira, and I'm sure you've probably seen this and talked about this as well, is our relationship, while we're in the process of reinventing with our family and friends. Because this is kind of the tricky part, right? Because if I meet a stranger and I tell them, oh, I do X, I'm a coach, I'm a garden design consultant, I'm a filmmaker, they're just going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Nice to meet you. They're not going to interrogate that. They're just going to accept it as a fact. But if you try to express that new identity with somebody that has known you before and has known you for a while, they often feel highly empowered to say, what are you thinking? Why are you doing that? What do you know about that? And it can be really upsetting if you're not prepared for it, because we often intuitively expect the people closest to us to be our biggest champions. And often the truth is they can kind of, unless you are really thoughtful about prepping them, they can sometimes be our biggest critics because they think that they are, somehow saving us from making a terrible mistake that clearly we've not thought through. So that can be a tough dynamic.
Totally. I am remembering both when I switched from a math major to psychology, and that is not a normal thing, by the way, for a Romanian person to be thinking about doing psychology. And that was hard to just share that that's what I was doing with my parents, because I was worried that they would think I had no future in this, right? And then later on, when I told them I was switching from clinical psychology to organizational psychology, which makes no sense to most people in my family, they're like, what is that? I don't understand, and I think it just comes from, like you said, a fear and anxiety that what if it doesn't work out, and a desire to protect you from failure. When in fact, it might be nice if it was like, go you can do this, and there are plenty of friends and family that do that as well. But some just are really protective of us. And it's helpful for us to just think about it that way, that it's coming from a good place, usually, that they're just worried that we won't succeed, but not to sort of like take it in.
Yeah, it is important to hold both of those things simultaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what else have you found to be really important as people are preparing to enter this like idea generation, machination around like my next steps? What does that first preparation phase look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, the honest truth is that oftentimes the very first phase, the preparation phase, is just one of dissatisfaction. That's kind of the starting point, right? Is, you
Yeah.
know, most people don't feel, I mean, some people are forced to reinvent, right? I mean, for me, I was laid off from my job as a journalist. So it's like, okay, better find something else. But for those who are undertaking reinvention voluntarily, usually it is because the thing they were doing is not doing it for them. And so they might not necessarily even know what they're seeking, but they know what they're not seeking. And it's usually the thing they've been doing. So there's kind of this amorphous period where it can feel hard to articulate because it's not too like it doesn't look that put together. I think, you know, maybe many people feel to be like, I'm just not happy. And then people are like, but what do you want? And you're like, I don't know. Like you kind of feel a little bit like a loser if you don't have a very clear thing to articulate. But I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes you just don't know. There's like this liminal period, and we have to be kind to ourselves in it because it actually is a little bit dangerous and counterproductive to try to leap too quickly into, oh gosh, I'm not happy, so therefore I should do XYZ. Because if you haven't properly vetted whatever that is, you're just as likely to sort of race headlong into another thing you don't want. So it actually pays to be thoughtful in the investigation process about, you know, taking the time to have a million informational interviews and coffees with people, and what's your job really like, and what do you spend your day doing, and, you know, reading biographies or memoirs of people who are doing the job that you want, or, you know, all those kinds of exploratory things.
Absolutely. And so some coaches call this the messy middle, right? The messy middle is that transition time from the end of something to the beginning of something else. And during that messy middle, it feels like you're lost all over the place. It feels like you're going nowhere when in fact you are going somewhere. You're just not quite sure. You haven't clarified it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So this makes me think about your own book journey. We've been talking about reinvention for a little bit. That was one of your first books, right? The Long Game is your most recent book. And I am wondering how you see the long game applying to this messy middle, and not getting lost in or stuck in the messy middle.
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously I'm always glad to talk about my book, but just a quick question for you, Mira,
Yeah.
beforehand. Talk to me about your shift, you know, let's say, to pick one of them, from clinical psychology to organizational psychology. How did that arise for you? How did you sort of realize, like, oh, not this, but that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think all along I wasn't your typical clinical psychologist. In fact, in graduate school, my advisor even said, I don't think clinical psychology is what you want to do. And I'm feeling like a administrative vibe here. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I
And
dismissed
why
it.
did he or she say that to you?
I think I was leaning into um, supporting his lab in very different ways. Like I was curious about taking the lead on certain things. And I was thinking in systems level ways, and I was thinking in operational ways, you know. Um, and the same thing happened immediately in my first job out after I finished my degree. Is yes, I was doing the job of a clinical psychologist on a research study, but I was spending a lot of time saying, can I just create a standard operating procedure for this so that we can get a better workflow and so that the team can work better? And can we create like some ways to resolve conflicts among team members around this? And eventually, I mean, that led right into management and leadership positions. And what I didn't realize until probably 8 years in is that I had informally respecialized myself into a team and organizational development psychologist because I loved the process of developing myself and others as leaders and developing the team and focusing on organizational stuff. I just didn't realize that was like the label, the thing that I was doing.
That's very interesting. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then at some point, I was wondering what's next. You know, I felt like I was just checking all the boxes and I wasn't really being challenged as much. And I asked myself, what are all the things that I do well? Then out of those, what do I see enjoying out of the things that I do well? And out of those, what are the things that people actually pay other people to do?
Worthy questions, yes.
By the way, we see a cat in your background. Who's this?
Yes, this is Philip. Philip has made it his mission to get extremely famous by crashing all of my Zoom calls. So yeah.
Love it. Philip is gorgeous. Hello, Philip.
Thank you. He's a very social kitty. Oh, he might even yeah,
now he
heard
wants
that, Mira.
attention.
He
wants
liked that
attention.
compliment. Thank you.
Yes. It's totally
keep
not
telling-
cool that this is not his show.
I know. Just keep telling him how beautiful he is, and soon he'll be right here.
Yeah. So it was a long game for me as well. It was a 10-year process of realizing kind of where I was going and taking a step back and thinking about what that was in order to inform my next step. And the final piece that helped me sort of like get over the hump of now I know what my next step is, how will other people know what I do, is something I think similar to some of the ways that you have handled this, is I looked for the largest national platform I could to start talking about things I was interested in, and pitched to all kinds of places, and ended up in Psychology Today as a blog series contributor focused on women's leadership. And that was how I got known for my new interests.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you raise an important point, which is that one of the things that people sometimes forget about when they think about reinvention or transition, you know, they focus rightly, of course, on like doing the thing, making the transition, but we have to recognize that's kind of only half the battle, because the second part that's really important is like making sure other people know you've done the thing.
Yes.
And getting known for that new thing.
Right. So how do people make sure that other people know what, because a lot of people don't realize that nobody is like watching them every minute of the day, figuring out what they do. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we in our heads, because of course it's our transition is a very big deal to us. We sort of imagine like, okay, I told them, now they know. But the truth is it takes so many iterations, because even very well-meaning people, they're just used to thinking of you in a certain way. They're gonna forget even if they try. And so we need to essentially keep reminding them. So that's where things like, I mean, in your case, for people who have a public platform, it can be about, writing articles in a magazine or something like that. On a more private level, it can be, what are you sharing on your social media feed? Are you talking about your old thing, or are you talking about your new thing? Because it's a useful opportunity to remind people. When you see people in person, are you talking about your new thing and reminding them, so that on a consistent basis, it's like, oh, right, she does this now. Because in politics, there's a saying that no one's going to vote for you. They won't even remember your name until they hear it 7 times. And the same is true, I think, of your reinvention.
Definitely. Okay, we are nearing an ad break. So as a reminder, you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dorie Clark. We air Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern. Find us on LinkedIn or YouTube at TalkRadio.nyc. And we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on TalkRadio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on TalkRadio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dorie Clark. We're talking about reinventing ourselves and the long game, the strategy that it takes to get there. Because of the fact that we are on a podcast and show that focuses on leadership identity and development, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how people who are moving into a new leadership role might think about these concepts internal to their own organization when they're like thinking about vision and communicating. And they're not maybe completely reinventing themselves, but in some ways they need to be seen differently than they've ever been seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. It can definitely be harder in many ways when you are trying to reinvent yourself within the same organization, because people have a template of you in their minds. And as you know, Mira and some of your listeners may know, one of the abiding elements of the human brain is its desire to be what is known as a cognitive miser. And basically that means that, like, at all costs, your brain wants to conserve energy and not think about things. And so if something seems stable, if something seems the same, your brain is basically going to go on autopilot. Your brain is so busy thinking about new things or new developments that if something is kind of steady state, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, fine, and they never consider it again. And the problem is that for a lot of us, our reputation with our friends and colleagues has gone into a steady state. And so if you met them 5 years ago, they probably think of you the way that they thought of you 5 years ago. Meanwhile, I mean, you might have gotten a doctorate, you might have learned to speak a new language, you might have gotten married and had kids, you might have, developed some incredible new ability, but it's not really in their brain. And even if they quote unquote know it, that's not really how they're thinking about you. And so we have to very consciously break those patterns and interrupt those patterns so that people are thinking of you in a new way. So that means we have to be very thoughtful upstream about, all right, how am I going to get them to take notice? What am I going to do differently? How am I going to create the conditions so that they recognize these things? So maybe it's looking for opportunities so that things can really break through. Oh, if I am a speaker at the workshop about this and they actually have to hear me deliver a speech about it, that's different. Okay, maybe they'll see, oh, she's doing this now. Or are there different things that you can be talking about regularly, or, ways to sort of demonstrate? Maybe you even start dressing slightly differently. If you're the boss now, maybe dress up a little bit more as a visual cue. There's a lot of possibilities, but I think that's one of the keys that we have to be mindful of.
Yes. I'm remembering how my supervisor had to actually kick me into doing these kinds of things, and tell me when I was doing my old stuff, and so he'd push me into talking on our behalf, for example.
Yeah.
And that was extraordinarily intimidating, but it was important for people to see me in a different way. He would ultimately say, at meetings, you sound like you're, thanking everyone and appreciating everyone and very tentative and as if you're still being mentored by everyone in the room, and you have to sort of break that. So definitely agree with that. What about like if you're moving to a different leadership role in a different organization and they don't know you? Obviously in that situation, what you're combating is their preconceived expectations of you, whatever they've read online about you and what they think that implies in your role. What are your thoughts on that kind of transition?
Yeah, so it's important, to your point, Mira, to try our best. It's not always easy for us because we're so close to it. So this is where bringing in a friend might be helpful as well. But as best you can, or with the help of a friend, try to essentially imagine what are the straw men that you're battling against, right? Like what are the things that they are worried about or that they might assume or whatever. I mean, I'm just making things up, but like, oh, they see you went to an Ivy League school, so they're going to think you're stuck up and that you think you're better than everyone, right? And so if that's the thing, you might say, oh, okay, well, if that's different from everybody else, if it's going to sort of stand out, maybe I need to over-index, at least in the, the first month or whatever, on being super accessible and super friendly, just so there's no way that they could be getting that impression. Or, whatever the thing is, as long as you're aware of what they might be thinking, then you can just make a little bit of an extra push to try to neutralize that thing.
That's a great strategy. Great. Okay. Let's go back to thinking now the long game. Those are like tiny strategies, right? Big picture, long game. You talk about career waves. What are these things about?
Yeah, so in the long game, I do talk about the concept of career waves, as you mentioned. Basically, what I mean by that is that a challenge, a sort of potential rut that we can fall into as humans, understandably, is that if you are doing a thing that is getting you results, if you are doing a thing that is working, quote unquote, people tend to keep doing it for a very long time, if not forever. And, that makes sense as far as it goes, but it does become problematic. And I think we need to be aware that we are cyclical creatures. We are not machines. A machine can do the same thing forever, and it's great because that it just can keep rocking it. But for humans, our whole lives are rhythms. We're on circadian rhythms every day. We need to sleep. Our digestion, our energy is on rhythms. And the truth is, our career arc is on rhythms as well. And so, for instance, we tend to just get caught in the trap of doing the thing either that we like a lot and we just do that, or doing the thing that we're good at and we do that a lot. But ultimately, you need to recognize that at a certain point, you kind of need to work on your weaknesses as much as you need to work on your strengths. Otherwise, eventually, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually a crack in the armor is going to form and the world is going to move on. So I talk about 4 key waves. The first one I call the learning wave, of course, because you start in a job, you start in an industry. All you can and should be doing right away is just taking in information and learning, and okay, great. Here's here's how this place works. So that's great. But eventually you need to stop doing that. I mean, okay, fine. You never officially stop learning, but you need to just, go out of sponge mode and begin to realize, okay, I got to earn my keep around here. I need to start sharing and creating. And that is, once you get the lay of the land, you need to start sharing your ideas. You need to make it a proactive contribution so that people see why you're there. You also, at a certain point, need to shift into connecting mode, where you're building relationships and you're sort of embedding yourself in that organization. And then finally, you get to what I call reaping mode, which is where, oh, great, all cylinders are on go. You're extremely comfortable there. Everybody knows you. You're rocking it. But if you just keep milking things, if you just keep sort of extracting, it's not going to go well forever. You need at a certain point to disrupt yourself and go back into learning mode, because you can't keep doing things the same way forever, or it gets ossified and eventually you get displaced.
Yeah. I like your point about getting the fear, the worry about getting displaced because you're not learning and growing and developing and changing along with the rest of the world. And sometimes I do see people getting complacent in where they are. And, that can be okay for a while, depending on your life circumstance, but they will find themselves at some point feeling like they've been left behind in some way, or they've lost out, or just don't feel the kind of depth of life satisfaction and career satisfaction that you could have the potential to feel if you're sort of constantly thinking about iterating and where, what am I sort of learning and growing into next?
Totally.
Yeah. So career waves is one thing that I really sort of resonated with as a concept. The other one was strategic patience. And I'm gonna read one piece of it because I don't know why I like this so much in your book, but I'm gonna read it. If it were easy to be patient and easy to do the work, then everyone would do it. What I've come to love about patience is that ultimately it's the truest test of merit. Are you willing to do the work despite no guaranteed outcome? And I thought, ooh, that's tough for some people, to not have any guarantee, to put in all the work, no guarantee of success. I'm really curious to hear more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's true that I guess there's a certain percentage of people that even if something were guaranteed, if it was going to take a while, they still wouldn't do it because they're so impatient. Those are probably some pretty hardcore, extreme hedonists out there. But for most people, yeah, I mean, I feel pretty confident that if you said to someone, all right, it's going to take a while, but you're guaranteed to succeed by doing it, then, I think most people will be like, okay, I can do it. But, we have to recognize, I am a big fan of embracing reality and the reality of everything in life. I mean, I'm sorry, like somebody says, I'm going to marry you. It's forever. Oh, really? Okay. I mean, let's hope that's the case, but it actually, for a variety of reasons, some in your control and some out of your control, that is not something that you can be guaranteed. And similar for anything in your career, anything in this world. And so if we're really going to be honest with ourselves, we have to say, does it matter to you enough anyway? Does it matter to you enough to say, all right, all I can do is roll the dice and hope that I get where I'm going to go. I'm making the best strategic bet that I can. You're not foolishly rolling the dice, but you are taking a calculated risk that your time and your effort is worth it for this outcome. I have to have respect for those people, because it's not always going to work out. But when it does, I really do feel it's richly deserved, because they've taken not just a time risk or an energy risk, they've taken an existential risk and said, all right, let's stare it down. It might not work, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Oh, love it. Does it matter to you enough anyway? That's a great message. And that is how we're going to go into our next ad break, for people to mull that one over. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Dorie Clark. We'll be right back in just a moment.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on TalkRadio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and intangify your business today.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Mira Broncu, and our guest, Dorie Clark. Behind the scenes, for any of you who are watching right now, all we've been talking about is everyone's cats. Our engineer is talking about his cat, Peanut Butter, the Flabby Tabby. We're having way too much fun in the background here. All right, where we left off, which I just really love here, is if you're thinking strategically and long-term, then you're going to have to make some calculated decisions, some calculated risks to decide, is the effort worth it? And if it's worth it, it's about, does it matter to you anyway? Are you willing to do it just because it matters to you? And I really like that message. One of the things that it got me thinking about is how sometimes I will say that being an entrepreneur is an exercise of being patiently impatient, or maybe it's impatiently patient. I'm not sure which one, but I think about that, like you're constantly feeling like a bit on edge, that you're not moving fast enough, and you have all of these big dreams and you want to get to that end stage, but you know some of the stuff takes 10 years to achieve, right? And that's not just, that's being realistic, which is what we were talking about, being realistic about how much time change takes. It also reminds me of a project that I was working with a group of people on, where they were creating action plans, and they're working in a large, complex system. And when I was listening to their ideas, I said, I love this idea. This is a 3-year goal. This is culture change. This is 10 to 20 years, right? How can you think about this as like the first 6 months? What will it take in this first 6 months? And then if you achieve that, then what will it lead to? I don't want to overwhelm people, but I do want to right size the goal so that they don't feel frustrated that they aren't meeting it, as if they can't.
Yeah, that's
right?
an important point.
Yeah. So what's one thing, Dorie, that you would like to have people take away from today about our talk?
Yeah, Mira, thank you. That we've covered so much great ground here. And I think it is an important topic or question for people. A colleague of mine named Bruce Feiler wrote a great book recently talking about career shifts. And one of the pieces of research that he had is that for most people, there's what he calls a work quake, some kind of professional disruption of whatever form, every 3 to 5 years. It doesn't necessarily have to be, an apocalyptic one, but it could be something fairly substantial that impacts you. Maybe you do change jobs or careers, you get promoted, or you get a new boss, and maybe you used to get along with your old boss really well and you don't get along with your new boss, or whatever it is. But it's never really a static set of affairs. And so I think understanding that we need to just try to hold things lightly. It's hard to hold things lightly when it's your life and when it's your career, but ultimately change happens a lot. And we began the conversation by talking about lowercase r reinvention and capital R reinvention. Where lowercase r reinvention comes in handy is just finding ways on an ongoing basis to keep yourself fresh, to keep yourself at sort of the edge of your abilities, learning new things, never sort of saying, oh, now I'm set, now I'm done, now I can sort of sit back. But to recognize, what, we need to make it a habit to read the book about the new emerging trend, or to make the effort to invite the person for coffee so that your network, your professional network, doesn't stagnate. If we can make those small things a habit, then it means that whenever there is a disruption, it's a heck of a lot less of a disruption than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've already named a number of things that I took away from it, but cognitive miser is a new one for me. So I'm gonna hold on to that one. Where can people find you? And while you are sharing this, I'm actually going to share my screen. Oh, looks like I can't share today, so I'm going to have to read out. If you go to one of my favorites, oh, now I can share it. Okay, go ahead. Where can people find you? And I'm going to show people while they're watching and listening here a couple of my favorites for you.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Mira. I appreciate it. Yeah, people can find me at my website is DorieClark.com. And if they're interested in reinvention in particular, if they go to DorieClark.com/reinvent, they can download the free Reinventing You self-assessment to help you think through questions of reinvention in your own life.
Reinvent.
Yeah, that should work.
There it is.
There it is. Thank you.
And build the career that you want. Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of these great resources and tools for people. Audience, what did you take away from today? And importantly, what is one small step, one little change that you can implement this week based on what Dorie shared? Share it with us on LinkedIn at Mira Brancu or Dorie Clark, or TalkRadio.nyc so we can cheer you on. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all over the place. But I happen to live on LinkedIn, which is why I keep saying LinkedIn, okay? In addition to the live show, we're on iTunes and Spotify. So please subscribe, leave a review, share with others to help us increase our visibility, reach, and impact. So in this episode, we discussed one of many aspects of developing a nuanced hard skills needed to become an exceptional leader who can drive significant systemic change and make real impact. If you would like to explore how we can help you with leadership and team development services, you can also go to gotowerscope.com. And you can also learn about our TowerScope Leadership Academy. Full membership starts early 2024. So be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to hear more about it when the application process opens up. And thank you again to TalkRadio.nyc for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, the host of the Hard Skills Show. Thank you for joining us today with Dorie Clark. Have a great rest of your day, wherever you're tuning in from. And don't forget, does it matter to you enough anyway? Don't be a cognitive miser. Google 20%, messy middle. These are all things to think about when you're thinking about where you are in your process and where you're heading. And if you need more help, I'm going to share these websites again. I'm going to share my screen also for those who are watching. You can go to DorieClark.com/reinvent to get yourself some free access to resources about reinventing yourself. You can check out her courses. This is the Recognized Expert one that I'm a part of, which is great. You can even get a Recognized Expert toolkit at DorieClark.com/toolkit to build the career you want and get your knowledge recognized. Any parting words besides that, Dorie?
Mira, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be on the show. And I would just say one comment, one hope for people that I talk about in my book, The Long Game. It's about optimizing for interesting. We all get a little confused sometimes when it comes to finding, what is our passion in life or what should we be doing? It's a very high bar. And what I like to say is, let's lower it. Let's make it a little easier for ourselves. And instead, let's ask the question, what do you find interesting and how can you do more of it in your life? That's a question that we all, I think, know the answer to, and it can lead us to good places.
I like ending on that because I have found myself that when I just dial up the time I spend on things that energize me and dial down the time I spend on things that de-energize me whenever I can. I don't always have that opportunity, but when I can, and I just follow where my feet go. I don't make an assessment about it. I don't make a judgment. I don't ask too many questions. I just follow where my feet are going. It has made all of the difference. So we'll close on that. And by the way, more cat pictures are happening in the background here. We are having a blast back here with cat pictures. Okay, thank you again, TalkRadio.nyc. And if you haven't had a chance to watch this live, you can always follow up later with a video recording or the podcast. Take care, everyone.